Greetings, friends, and welcome to the channel. Before we dive in, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell right now, because the story we're about to unravel today isn't just a dry history lesson. It's a detective story, the detective story of the century, a labyrinth where lies, geopolitics, and thousands of lives are intertwined. And I promise you, by the end of this deep dive, your understanding of one of the darkest chapters of World War II might be turned completely upside down. Stay until the end, it's going to be intense. And be sure to write in the comments what you think as we go. Your perspective is invaluable. So, the million-dollar question, or rather, the question of thousands of fates. Who was actually executed in the Katyn forest? The official narrative, repeated in textbooks and political debates, is clear. In the spring of 1940, near Smolensk, in the Katyn forest, approximately 4,500 Polish officers were shot. Two superpowers, the USSR and Nazi Germany, spent decades blaming each other. But on one point they seemed to agree. The pits contained Poles, soldiers and commanders of the Polish army. But what if this is the greatest hoax of the 20th century? What if under those Polish uniforms, which, by the way, weren't even proper uniforms, lay a much darker, completely different truth? Let's rewind the tape and look at the events not from the end, but from the very beginning. Not from the moment the graves were discovered, but from the moment the plan that led to those graves was conceived. To understand Katyn, we need to travel back not to 1941 or 43. We need to go further back, to the aftermath of World War I, to the smoky rooms where the maps of Europe were redrawn, and to the bitter, simmering grudges that were left to fester. Part 1. The Crucible of Resentment, Poland, Ukraine, and the Ghosts of Empire. After World War I, the old empires crumbled. From their ashes rose new nations, their borders often drawn with a shaky hand, ignoring ethnic and historical realities. Poland was reborn, and its eastern borders, established after the Polish-Soviet War of 1919-20, were a point of deep contention. Vast territories with significant Ukrainian and Belarusian populations became part of the new Polish state. For many Ukrainian nationalists, this was a betrayal. Their dream of an independent Ukraine was buried under Polish administration. This is where our first key organization enters the stage, the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists, OUN. Founded in 1929, its goal was the creation of an independent Ukrainian state, by any means necessary. Many of its members were veterans of earlier struggles, fiercely anti-Polish and anti-Soviet. Defeated, they often fled to Europe, where they searched for powerful patrons. And they found one, or rather, the patron found them. In the late 1920s, the OUN's leader, Yevhen Konovalets, established contact with Alfred Rosenberg, the chief ideologue of the nascent Nazi Party. Rosenberg saw potential in these fanatical, battle-hardened nationalists. Here was a perfect tool, a radical force that could destabilize both Poland and the Soviet Union from within. This was not just an alliance of convenience. It was a meeting of twisted ideologies. The OUN admired the Nazis' discipline, racial nationalism, and sheer power. The Nazis saw useful proxies. This partnership was so dangerous that in 1938, Soviet intelligence, on Stalin's direct orders, eliminated Konovalets. The legendary NKVD operative Pavel Sudoplatov carried out the assassination with a booby-trapped box of chocolates. A darkly symbolic end. But you can't kill an idea with a bomb. Leadership of the OUN passed to Andrei Melnik. And it was with Melnik that the Nazis decided to play their biggest card. Part 2. Operation Weiss, a shadow army in Polish uniforms. Here we meet a master of intrigue, Admiral Wilhelm Canaris, head of the Abwehr, German military intelligence. In 1938-39, with Hitler's blessing, Canaris initiated a top-secret plan codenamed Fall Weiss, Case White. This wasn't just the plan for the invasion of Poland. It had a clandestine sub-operation aimed at causing chaos from within. Canaris made Melnik a devil's offer. The Abwehr would train and equip a clandestine Ukrainian nationalist army. Their mission? To infiltrate Poland ahead of the German invasion and launch a wave of sabotage, assassinations, and terror to destabilize the Polish state from the rear. In return, Canaris dangled the ultimate carrot, After Poland's defeat, an independent Galician state would be created, with Melnik at its head. The deal was struck. Across secret training camps in Germany, hundreds, then thousands of OUN members were trained in sabotage, intelligence gathering, and guerrilla warfare. They weren't just training rank-and-file fighters. They were training an officer corps, a command structure. By the summer of 1939, historians estimate this shadow army numbered up to 20,000 men, including around 4,000 officers and commanders. But there was a problem. To move behind Polish lines, they needed to blend in. The solution? Disguise them as Polish soldiers. The Abwehr's quartermasters, working from photographs, hastily sewed up Polish-style uniforms. But intelligence work often fails on the details. The cloth was the wrong shade, the cut was off, the belts were cheap plastic instead of leather. From a distance, it might pass. Up close, to a trained eye, it was a poor imitation. They were dressed as Poles, but they weren't Poles. They were a wolf in sheep's clothing that didn't quite fit. Part 3: War and the Great Trap. On September 1, 1939, Germany invaded Poland. World War II began. The OUN cells, now infiltrated into Polish territory, activated. They began attacking Polish institutions, military patrols, and communications, trying to spread panic. Their goal was clear: help the Germans smash the Polish state. But then came a geopolitical earthquake that neither the OUN nor, to some extent, Berlin had fully planned for. On September 17th, the Red Army crossed the eastern border of Poland. Citing the need to protect the lives and property of Ukrainians and Belarusians, and acting on a secret clause of the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, Stalin moved to reclaim the territories lost in 1920. It was a swift, decisive operation. Western Ukraine and Western Belarus were annexed to the Soviet Union. In the chaos, hundreds of thousands of Polish military personnel surrendered to the Germans in the west and to the Soviets in the east. And here lies the critical moment. Among the masses of genuine Polish soldiers surrendering to the Red Army in the east were those OUN diversants in their fake Polish uniforms. They were caught in the net. To the Soviet troops, they were just more disarmed Poles. They were disarmed, documented, and sent to NKVD filtration camps. Now, according to the Soviet-German agreements, prisoners of war were to be transferred based on where their units were originally stationed. But when it came to this particular group of about 20,000 Poles in strange uniforms, something unusual happened. Germany refused to take them. Think about that. The Nazis, who created this force, suddenly didn't want them back. Why? Several reasons likely played a role. First, Hitler, fresh from signing the non-aggression pact with Stalin in August, didn't want an early scandal over a clandestine operation. Second, and more crucially, these OUN fighters had become a liability. They had been trained to cause chaos in Poland, not to sit in German POW camps. They were fanatical, uncontrollable, and their mission was now obsolete. Moreover, their attacks had not only targeted Poles but, in the new reality, could have been directed at Soviet forces. Handing them over was a way to pass a hot potato to Stalin and let him deal with the problem. Part 4: The NKVD's Dilemma and Stalin's Decision. So, the NKVD found itself with tens of thousands of Polish prisoners, among whom were several thousand highly trained, ideologically committed Ukrainian nationalist operatives, disguised as Polish officers. It didn't take long for Soviet counterintelligence to figure out who they were. Interrogations, comparisons of documents, which were often crude forgeries, and informants would have revealed the truth. This presented Stalin with a monstrous dilemma. What to do with them? Release them? Unthinkable. They were enemies sworn to destroy the Soviet state, now right in its heartland. Keep them in camps? They were a ready-made, organized insurgency waiting to explode in the rear, especially with a war with Germany looking increasingly likely. Hand them over to the Poles? The Polish government in exile was already hostile, and these men were enemies of Poland as well. Stalin made a decision that was brutal, pragmatic, and in the grim context of the pre-war and wartime Soviet Union, tragically standard. He applied the logic of class and national danger. The rank-and-file soldiers, both genuine Poles and OUN members, were seen as less dangerous, more susceptible to re-education. Tens of thousands of them were sent to labor camps. Later, Many would form the core of the Polish People's Army, Armia Ludowa, that fought alongside the Red Army. But the officers, the command staff of this OUN sabotage army, were a different matter. They were the ideologues, the leaders, the irreconcilables. The order was given for their liquidation. It's a horrific act, but it's crucial to understand the context. This was not a unique atrocity. In war, special forces, saboteurs, and spies caught out of uniform were often executed summarily by all sides. The US and British forces, for example, were under orders to execute captured German SS saboteurs during the Normandy landings in 1944. Part 5. Katyn, the chilling evidence that points elsewhere. So we come to the graves themselves. In 1943, German forces, now occupying Smolensk, discovered the mass graves and loudly blamed the Soviets. The Soviets, in turn, blamed the Germans in 1944. But let's look at the forensics and the logic. The number, approximately 4,500 bodies. This number correlates suspiciously well with the estimated size of the OUN officer corps trained for Operation Weiss, around 4,000. Not with the total number of Polish officers in Soviet captivity, which was over 15,000. If Stalin wanted to decapitate the Polish military intelligentsia, why execute only a fraction? Why not all of them? The selective number points to a specific group, not a general category. The uniforms, witnesses and forensic reports from the German exhumation noted the poor quality of the uniforms, the synthetic leather belts, the odd buttons. These descriptions match the Abwehr-issued disguises, not standard Polish army issue. The method, later Soviet and post-Soviet investigations, while officially blaming the NKVD, revealed contradictory evidence. Some bodies showed wounds from German Walther pistols, standard for the Wehrmacht. But many more showed signs of execution by machine gun or even bayonet wounds, suggesting a more chaotic mass execution style. This messiness doesn't fit the standard NKVD execution protocol but could fit a rushed operation against a dangerous, resisting group. The silence and the stage. Hitler knew about Katyn. His troops held the area. He knew who was buried there. But he waited almost 3 years to reveal it. Why? Because dead Ukrainian nationalists were a propaganda non-event. But Polish officers murdered by the Bolsheviks? That was a goldmine. It could split the Allied coalition, turn world opinion, and demoralize the Polish forces fighting alongside the West. Historians like German researcher Franz Cadell have suggested the Nazis staged the site. They planted genuine Polish officer IDs, taken from other POWs or the dead, added some actual Polish bodies for authenticity, and carefully curated the evidence for their propaganda show in 1943. Part 6. The tragic irony and a call for honest memory. The greatest, most bitter irony of Katyn is this. For decades, and even today, Poland has mourned its sons there. But if this analysis is correct, a significant portion of those graves contain the very men whose sworn mission, funded and trained by the Nazis, was to kill Poles and dismantle the Polish state. They are victims of a different, no less terrible crime, but their martyrdom is based on a case of mistaken identity orchestrated by history's most cynical regimes. We are left with a tangled web. Two totalitarian systems, Nazi Germany and the Stalinist USSR, both guilty of unimaginable crimes. One created a secret army and then discarded it. The other, discovering this enemy in its midst, eliminated it with extreme prejudice. Then, they spent decades using the graves of those they killed as a propaganda football, obscuring the truth and deepening the tragedy. This story isn't about absolving one monster by blaming another. It's about peeling back the layers of a historical onion that stings the eyes of every nation involved. It's about understanding that in the grand chessboard of war and ideology, real people become pawns, both in life and in death. So what do you think? Does this narrative connect the dots? Does the pre-war history of the OUN, Operation Weiss, and the strange circumstances of the discovery shed a new light on that grim forest near Smolensk? The archives are still not fully open. Politicians still trade accusations. But perhaps the truth lies not in choosing between the official versions of Berlin or Moscow, but in looking at the cold, cynical logic of them both. This is why history matters. It's not just about the past. It's a warning about how easily truth can be buried, how effectively propaganda can weaponize grief, and how the ghosts of manipulated conflicts can haunt us for generations. If this deep dive made you think, if it challenged what you knew, then I've done my job. Let's keep the conversation going. Write in the comments below. Do you believe the Katyn narrative is complete? What other pieces of this puzzle are missing? And most importantly, if you want more fearless, deep dives into history's greatest mysteries, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell, because there are many more labyrinths to explore, and I need you with me on that journey. Until next time, stay curious.